Hello and welcome to the Money Queen podcast. I am Alex Nicolaitis, the Money Queen. I am here to unite the masculine and feminine energetics of money and invite you in joining me to break the stigma of we don't talk about money here. I will deliver the loving bitch slaps that you need in your business to elevate you as a leader and support you to that next level and welcoming in the wealthiest version of yourself. With over 13 years in the accounting and bookkeeping industry, I utilize the support of the masculine in systems, structure, support, and ATO compliance, combined with the feminine of the energetics of mentoring, guiding, getting really curious, and allowing ourselves to be open to receiving. So hit that subscribe button, leave me a rating, and I cannot wait to have you by my side as we raise the feminine collective and create true generational wealth and change. I have a special guest for you today. I'm so excited to have her here. If you cannot tell in my voice, she is my business bestie, my gal pal, my ride or die. If you're in my space, you know exactly who I'm talking about right now. She's laughing in the background. She needs no introduction. Casey Warwick, thank you so much for being here.
You're so welcome. Like when I'm like, do you need an actual bio? I totally loved the one that you did so much more than the ones that I have.
Yes. Oh my God. This has been a long time coming. I mean, A, the podcast, you've been telling me to do that for years, and B, like actually having you on board here. So I'm like, yes. I love that this gets to be a reality in our world. And so, all right. For those who like, I don't know, live on another planet and don't know who you are in my world, can you set the scene for me? And because this podcast is all about like having money conversations and allowing money to actually be less of a taboo in our world and like actually lean into what are our money stories? Where do we come from? Where are we actually at now? Like what lessons did we learn? Like what challenges did we go through to be able to be the business owner that we are today and to be able to make more impact in this world and to generate more wealth in your world to then, create that ripple effect in your space, in your world, in this life that we're living. Set the scene for me of what language was used around money in your home when you were growing up.
This is a big one, right? So, okay, if you know just how deep Elle and I are in each other's worlds, right, you can understand that I've also hired her for her services as well to help me with my money stuff because, at the end of the day, I grew up in housing commission. My parents had drug addictions. You let me just like paint that scene for you, right? Like there was domestic violence. There was so much, I guess you could say, unconscious activity, like without going into detail, that, it was quite hard financially. And I remember like, how like the catalogs come around each week, like when you were younger, they don't really do it these days anymore, but like we'd get the printed out catalogs and I'd be like, oh, Mum, I want this or I want that. And I'd like share with her what I wanted. And we would do it from the intention that it was Christmas. Like we're giving her the idea. But every time it was, I can't fucking afford that. Stop asking for shit. Fuck this. Like it was that kind of language. And so I grew up thinking not to ask for anything. Don't have your needs met. Like, and even though, my mum tried her best to do all those things, like we had the duality of like when it was good, it was incredibly good because my stepdad had dabbled in like all kinds of unconventional ways of earning money, right? Without going into the detail of that. But when it was good, we had such an influx and an overflow, but our life in those moments wasn't getting set up. It was getting splurged on. Right. And so it was like, oh my God, we have money now. Let's go shopping. Oh my God, we have money now. Let's go out here. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. So for me, I never grew up with a forefront in mind. Like I never grew up thinking of the future. I only grew up week to week, like pension to pension, essentially. And I think I've shared this story with you before and on my own podcast, but it's like, I remember so distinctly at like the age of 8 years old, I was looking at my mum scrounging through the couch to try and find enough money for a 99-cent loaf of bread. Right? Like, and I mean, she was so stressed and so anxious. And I was just like, I remember like vividly hearing, this will not be your life. And so for me, it was like I had all of this happening in my world where money was great and then scarce, great then scarce, great then scarce, right? And just had a funny little moment then in my head. We're both like, oh, we're going to unpack that later.
Yes, we are. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it was like I'd then go to my dad's, who my dad and my mum had separated, but dad then went on to build this incredible, huge company. So it was like I wouldn't hear from dad, and then when I'm physically with him, he would like splurge like crazy. I'm talking it was nothing to spend $1,000 on dinner. It was nothing to, go and do every experience that was possibly available at the time, because that was his way of showing us love. So I was like, oh, love means expensive stuff, but I was also like, I don't have that in my home. And my mum's telling me she's trying to do everything for me. And I was just confused. Like I had so many different worlds of what financial wealth looked like, but actually none of it was setting me up for the future. So that's backstory.
I think like it's such a common story of when people grow up, and it's like the highs, the lows, like there's not actually that stability in your world or in a lot of people's world to be like, this is what safe money feels like. Like there's just so much like it's either fucking amazing or it's either fucking terrible. It's either like, yes, buy all the things, it's Christmas and splurge, 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 or it's like, we can't afford that, put that down, like don't touch that, only look at that. It's just such a constricting feeling. And I believe that, I know that where you are at now and where I want to, move through into when I do have kids, that's involving thing, is creating that stability around like, and a concept I believe in is nothing's good or bad, wrong or right, good, bad or evil. It's like, it just is. Like, and how can we bring that concept into the money world? Like, it's not amazing, it's not terrible, it's not good, it's not bad, it's not wrong, it's not right. Like, it just is. I know. And what is our current reality? And like, how can we shift in alignment with where we actually want to move forward to in relationship to our current reality, as opposed to like putting these labels on it to be like, fuck, we're in huge scarcity, or oh my God, we've got all this money. And like another piece in that when you're riding that roller coaster is that lack of trust. Because when you have a lot of money come into your world, and you see it all the fucking time with lotto winners, they win millions of dollars and then they spend it in the next 5 years. Actually, I don't know the number of it. If you do, please share. It's
actually 84% of people who win the lottery within 2 years are poorer than before they won it. Yeah.
Because they don't trust themselves.
Yeah.
It's like this money comes into my world and I don't trust myself enough to hold it. I don't feel that I'm responsible enough. I don't feel like I'm worthy enough to hold on to this wealth, to create more from this wealth, to like even have it in my sphere right now. So I'm going to repel it. I'm literally going to spend it. I'm going to give it to other people. I'm going to be like irresponsible in inverted commas with this money and just get it out of my world already so I can go back to my comfort zone. And what does my comfort zone look like? It looks like scarcity. And that's where my norm is. And our brains are literally regulated to like push us back to our comfort zone. And if that's scarcity for you, that's 100% where you're going to get back to really fucking quickly if you do win the lotto and you're not actually like your nervous system isn't regulated to hold that wealth because you've just not been taught that before.
Totally. And just on like another side point of that as well, like because a lot of the money in my world, just to like I said I wasn't going to go into it, but I'm going into it. A lot of the money that did come into our world was from drugs, right? So it was like then there's this added connotation that to have money is bad.
Yes.
Right? And so you're like in this play of like, can I actually be a good person and have money as well? And I know a lot of people like have that belief system that they're running from. It's like, in order to make money, I've got to do bad things, right? And so for me, in the earlier years of like learning that money is actually good, I had no idea about like all the other tiny little belief money stories that I had. But that one was like so big. So as you said, like repel. I literally did everything in my power to like get money out. And I remember the first time I ever had more than $1,000 in my bank account, right? Like this is how long it took me to get to that point. I was 27. And it was because of a tax return, right? Like, I kid you not. And for those of you who knew me, I was already in business at this point, right? I was already doing my thing. I was a personal trainer. And I remember that time going, oh my God, there's $1,000 in my account. I'm safe. And I was like, fuck. Like, but then, like, the minute it happened, spent it. Like, and I dropped myself straight back down, and I was like, oh, and that was when I actually spoke to one of my friends about it, and they were like, oh yeah, you need to reset your wealth point. And I was like, what? Like, and they're like, your wealth point. Have you ever noticed that your account goes back to the same amount every week? Mine was negative $200, right? And then I started hearing all these things around, like, you know, what's in your bank account is a representation of your self-worth and all these other things, right? So I started then making it mean so many wrong things for me to then be like in a space of like building or deficit or anything like that. So rather than getting myself out of scarcity, I drove that deeper into my nervous system of like, I now have to have like 30 grand in my account or 50 grand in my account just to feel safe, not trusting that it was an ever flowing thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a beautiful segue into the next piece that I want to talk to you about is how old were you when you started your first business?
On paper, technically, I was 22.
Yeah. Perfect. So at age 22, with hindsight now, what lesson about money do you wish that you had known back then for any 22-year-olds that are listening right now and are just about to start their own business? Impart your wisdom onto them, please.
I've got wisdom from even earlier than that. Right? So
okay. We're here for it all. Let's go.
When I was 18, I joined the military, right? And I suddenly had way more money than I ever fucking thought that I could have, because that was a lot for me back then, right? Like, and it wasn't the world's greatest wage but however, for me it was. And so what I did was, like, as soon as I came into money, my lifestyle suddenly expanded so much, and I capped myself out at that new level of money, right? So it was like, I remember seeing these shoes. I think I've told you about this. They were Tony Bianco shoes, right?
Yes.
So fucking ugly, these shoes. They were stripper heels, right? But because they were Tony Bianco and I could now afford them, I fucking bought them, right? And it was purely because of the name that was on there. And it makes me think back to that, you know, that saying, like, I can't remember it like verbatim, but it's like, broke people will want you to think that they're rich. Rich people have no interest in proving it to you.
Absolutely. Right? Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's how I was. I suddenly was like, oh, I want people to think I have money because I'm in the military. Right. So I started like buying all these expensive clothes, and rather than just going to like JJ's to get like an average singlet, I was like making sure I went to Myer and spending $90 on a singlet and like little things like that, like, for what purpose? Like, it wasn't producing anything out. So for me, the piece of advice I now have is like, and because this piece of advice I actually implemented from the business day. So this is why I give this now, as in like it started earlier, was those extra pieces of money that you get, like, stay within like your living means already. Like, don't just suddenly go, oh, I've got more, I can spend more and I can splurge more and be more. Like, allow yourself to actually, like, hands down, invest it. Because for me, like, the minute I started my business, I kid you not, every single spare bit of money I had, still to this day, almost goes into developing my business, right? And I have another rule that I think would be really great for this segment, this piece, is if you can't claim it, don't fucking spend it.
Yes.
Like, people used to be like, why do you get your nails done and do all that sort of stuff before? And I was like, because I could claim it. The only reason I don't get them done now is because I actually prefer my hands without them on, right? But, like, I'll probably go through a phase where I'll start doing it again and it will be claimed as branding and all the things, right? So I'm like, I can't invest my wealth now that I'm like, and look, I'm no fucking expert. You know this first class, like firsthand, I'm no expert at it. But the one thing that I know is, like, if I do not get a return on something, whether it be a skill set or, nourishing food in my body or something like that that's actually going to add something to me, I absolutely don't want it. Like, so I see women spending like $130 a fortnight on fucking lashes. And I'm just like, that could change your whole world if you invested that a bit.
Yeah.
So I'm just a no.
And I think, I think the phrase that you said in that piece, for me, I say quite often to myself, like, for what purpose? And it takes me back to your Tony Bianco shoe example. It's like, I remember my first pair of Tony Biancos, I wore them in the office, and every time I wore them in the office, I was like, oh, look at me, I'm wearing my Tony Biancos. And there was this other girl that I sat with in this office, this was in my accounting days, and she was like label, and like came from a wealthy or wealthier family than me. And I remember just being like, she's just so fucking stuck up herself. And I'm like, I just couldn't stand up. But then, like, I noticed the shift in my body when I wore my Tony Biancos, and I was like, yes, girl, like, work it. Yeah, exactly. But it's like, it comes back to that theory of, like, keeping up with the Joneses. Like, for what purpose? Why? Like, why did my energy shift when I had my Tony Biancos on? I was trying to, like, compare to her. I was trying to get to her level because I saw her and having all these external labels, and she was definitely someone who was like, whatever label she was wearing, you freaking knew it because she either told you about it or it was like splashed over her like chest or jeans or ass, wherever it was, you knew it. And, you know, the saying, I think you referenced this, is the wealthiest people are so minimalist in showing their wealth versus the people who are like living on credit, and it's like they've got the label splashed over because they're seeking that validation from external people, from external places, external sources to be like, yes, I've made it. And then going home and sitting in there like fucking fear and scarcity. Now, this isn't everyone, but it's the majority of the population. The people that are in this situation. And then the wealthiest people are like, I don't need that external validation. I simply don't, because that power comes from within me. I decide what I want to spend and invest my money on. And if it looks like a t-shirt with a big brand on it, great. Okay, cool. But if it looks like a t-shirt that doesn't even have a label, that's also like, that's my truth as well. And it's really getting clear on, and a theme that I was picking up in your share was, you know, what's your truth?
It's funny. It's funny you say that because, like, I remember when I first became a mum, I don't know if you remember me having these conversations, but I was like, I wanted everything brand new, right? I was like, everything fucking brand new. My son will have the best of everything. I was that mum. I was like, I don't give a fuck what anyone says. It's going to be brand new. Anyway, he went from 5 zeros to 4 zeros to 3 zeros to 2 zeros in 2 weeks, right?
Oh,
like,
wow.
He grew so fast. He's a moldy baby, right? Like, he's got that blood in him. He was a big baby. And so I was just like, oh, shit. Like, I had spent $1,000 just on sleep suits, and none of them fit him within 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, wow.
So I was like, everyone was starting to give me hand-me-downs because when they have a baby, people just, like, dump stuff on your door. So I was like, oh, my God, thank God, finally. Like, and it was funny because I watched just how quickly it shifted once I realized the reality of being a mum, right? Like, it was like online we see all these Instagram moms and these people like rocking up with like their kids in all these labeled clothes and stuff. But then when I seen how dirty they get and how grubby they are and how just spew gets over everything, I was just like, for what purpose would I put all of this money into that only to have it do that? Like, obviously I spend money on clothes for him when it's like stuff where I'm like, I want him to look decent when we go out and those sorts of things. But like, I have a rule, like play clothes as in like stuff he goes to daycare, all that sort of stuff. Like, that's all the hand-me-down stuff. Because I'm just like, this is the thing. And I seen, my point I was trying to make was the other day I was in the mall and I seen this family and I could tell the mother obviously had been putting herself last because her regrowth was so long, but her men looked incredible. They were dressed to the nines in all their stuff, and she looked like shit. Her baby had fucking Nike shoes on, $70 for a kid's pair of shoes that are literally going to probably outgrow in weeks, if not. Like, and I just think to myself, I'm like, that to me shows me that you know, when it comes to being the wealthiest version of you, it's like I'm going to put it in all the things external to me, because if my men are looked after, then I'm a good mom, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I'm like, no, like, and this was the point that I was trying to make before. It was like, we have these ideas of what wealth looks like if everything outside of us is great, but then we present ourselves to the world like a piece of shit. And I was just like, that for me, I will never like actually discredit my own values and my own worth to invest in myself just to make it look like I'm together as a mom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like in that whole to make it look like I'm together,
Mm.
anyone who tells you that they've got their shit together, they're fucking lying.
Oh.
Like, lie, pants on fire. Like, and, you know, listening to what you just said, it's like, again, external versus internal.
Yeah.
Like, who cares what clothes your child is wearing? Like, I care about the human that's inside of those clothes.
Yeah.
Like, if they're a little shit, like, and you've not been able to discipline them in a way that actually, like, makes them a compassionate person or an empathetic person, or, like, you know, when they see someone's upset, go and giving them a hug or something like that. Like, you know, I remember, it just flashed back to a memory when I came to your place. I think it was the last time I was going through some things of being able to receive love. And I literally like walked onto your driveway and I just burst into tears and I was like, oh my God. And then like Tiaraki just like came up to me and just gave me like this beautiful hug. And I was like, like, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Like, not the freaking clothes that he's wearing. Like, that's what matters. What type of human are you raising, as opposed to like what labels are you putting on them? Like, where are you investing your energy and money? Because energy is money, money is energy. So it's like, what actually is most important to you in the long-term game?
Like we say it all the time, you know, when in our work of like, you know, money is just time compounded, right? And I was like, the thing that I found really interesting about watching that dynamic is like, you know, how you're like money is energy, all those sorts of things. I was watching just the dynamic of the entire family and I could tell that she was just like, like, you know, moping along, and he was all like pumped up, ready to go because he had been looked after. And I thought to myself, I'm like, this happens so often for all of us as women where we're like, you know, we want the wealthiest life, yet there's no input to ourselves. And like something I've adopted that I took from, you know, working through all the stuff that we've worked through and those sorts of things is the tiny little wealth upgrades. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like for me? And like, sometimes it can be something so fucking simple, and sometimes it can be something really, really big. It just depends on what that feels like. And I think, you know, and not enough women emphasize the value of their own worth in what their current financial reality is. Right. And what I mean by that is, like, we were talking yesterday just about like the reality of scarcity. Like, some moments scarcity is warranted in terms of like, you know, a business decision or something like that. In other moments where you're choosing that as a way of being, like, that's where it's not warranted. That's where we get to look at what's actually going on underneath that. Because I guarantee you that piece is affecting not only your financial position, it's affecting how you're showing up with men, it's affecting how you're receiving friendships, it's probably affecting every part of your life.
Yeah. And as a saying that we say in our world, everything touches everything.
Yep.
And I think, like, you know, I think it was you that I was speaking to yesterday, and this example I got from Alex Hormozy the other day, which we also love. And
whole pass. Oh my God.
yes, please.
I am like fangirling hard, and my partner knows it. It's so funny.
It's so known. But like the example that he said on his podcast, was scientists did this experiment on a mice or a rat or something like that. It had a piece of cheese in front of it, and they noticed how fast let's just call it the mice ran without the cheese, to be like, this is the base level. Then they put a piece of cheese in front of it, and then they tested how like quickly it ran, and it was like 2x, for instance. And then they put the whiff of a cat behind it. So they had the pleasure in front and the pain behind, and the mice actually ran like 10x. when it had the two options, and it was like, where do I actually want to sit in between the pain and the pleasure, in between the good and the bad, the right, the wrong, whatever language you want to put around that, the fear and the scarcity. And when you just focus on the pleasure, it's like, yeah, you are going to move forward, but more than when you didn't have a pleasure point in front of you. And when you've got this fear and scarcity behind you, you also will run at more than what's sort of normal. But when you actually appreciate the both parts of that equation without discounting or rejecting either part, it's like that's where the magic happens. So that's where the magnetism happens, because it's like you're not closing your eyes to anything, you're not rejecting anything, you're actually like in full acceptance of what is your current reality with both ends of the stick, and you're then choosing where do you want to be along this line. And that's a really fucking powerful way of being, because it's full acceptance of your full self, of your full reality. And that is where a lot of people fall down, because they're like, I just want the pleasure. I just want the pleasure, or I just want to run away from this. I don't want this anymore. I came from this fear and scarcity. I don't want a bar of it. It's like, yes, and.
Yeah, that was the thing I was going to speak into. You see so much at the moment, like the marketing online is directed straight towards pleasure. And the one thing that I'm seeing, the theme of this is like, everyone's going, oh, don't talk about pain points, don't talk about this anymore. And what's happened is it's diluted half the message for half the people. And then they're like, oh, why am I not selling anymore? And I'm like, well, you know what? Like if someone's already in a space of comfort, to move them to even more comfort feels like a lot of fucking effort. Like, let's be honest, like unless like that gold dangly thing that you've got that's moving them is like, I'm talking going to rapidly change everything in their world, that means no effort for them, they're not jumping over that. But you highlight the actual truth of their entire reality, you give them their pain and show them where their desire can end up if you give them absolute fullness in that. That's when you're going to actually start moving the needle in your business or in any kind of service-based entity that you're inside of, because this particular piece, and like, we talked about it just before, like the scarcity side of the mindset, one thing that I've personally noticed is so many people have made it almost like you're not feminine if you experience scarcity, you're not this if you do that, you're not, and it's like, you know what, like life sometimes, and sometimes emotions happen where it forces your nervous system to go into fight, flight, freeze, or appease. That does not take you out of the feminine space, essentially. Like all it does is activate more of your masculine, because you're going to start protecting. Doesn't mean you fucking lose it, right? So what we need to learn how to do is like when we are activated, when we are feeling all those things, like how does our body want to respond to that? Because that's the energy we start emitting. And as you said, like the magnetic piece, like so many of us are like, oh my God, if I have any kind of level of scarcity, I'm not going to, be magnetizing and all these sorts of things. And I'm just like, you have no idea how much scarcity I've ran in my life, and people always like, oh my God, you're so magnetic all the time. And it's because I'm not playing the and or game, or the or game. I'm playing the fucking and the both game.
If you are listening to this episode and are picking up what I'm putting down and are ready to unpack and elevate your money story, then pop over to my website and see the money coaching package that is calling your name. Find out for yourself why I have been called the money queen that everyone needs in their life. After working with me, my clients are reclaiming their power in their business, and this has seen them bring hundreds of thousands of dollars into their businesses after having me on board their team. Are you ready to expand? Then let's fucking go, queen. Book in a call with me on my website, which is alexunscripted.com, to show the universe that you are here for everything that you fucking desire and you are taking action. I want to take you back to just before you started working with me, and you were like, we've been in each other's world for an awful long time, like a real long time.
I was one of my PT clients, peeps. Like that's nearly 10 years ago.
Yeah. A decade-long friendship here. But interestingly enough, and like I've been in the accounting and bookkeeping space the entire time that you've known me. So it took you up until the last 2 years to actually say yes to working with me and allowing yourself to be seen in all of your glory, in all of your mess, in all of your things around the money world.
Yeah.
So, I really want to speak into like, what was your experience knowing knowing me for such a long time, knowing that I was an expert in that field.
I fucking did not want to show you anything.
Yeah.
I was like,
I guarantee.
I was like, fuck, this bitch is going to like know all my shit. And I was your business coach, right? So I was like, if there is any part of lack of integrity, she's going to know it. Like, blah, 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 blah. Like, and I was just like, nah. I was just like, no fucking way. I even said to Urbane, I was just like, Urbane was the one who actually was like, rather than like dealing with this other accountant that you don't like, just get Alex to do the work. Like, and I was like, nah, babe, nah. It's like,
I actually remember that because Urbane came to me and said something, and I was like, geez, this is weird that Case didn't come to me for this. And then afterwards you told me that like you and him had like this mini, an interesting conversation to be like, why did you do that? Like I wasn't ready for that. And then it was like, actually, that was what I needed to like lean into this. So
100%. Like he honestly, like when people go, oh, what does he do in the business? I'm like, he just pokes me in the right direction all the time. Like, and anyway, I was just like, why would you do that? She's my client. I don't want to cross that bridge. I don't want to like make the lines messy and blah, 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 blah. And, she's going to be in too many parts of my world. Like that's literally what I said. I was like, she's going to be in too many parts because I'd already like, you were my client, but you were also coaching my clients. And it was like this whole thing. And I was like, and then to have you in that space as well, I was like, oh, too much. Like, and that was the feminine wound, that particular piece. But the thing around the money was like, because I'd made some really bold claims online about what I'd been earning and those sorts of things, I was like, I just needed to know for myself that I was in integrity. And it was quite funny actually, because prior to that, I'd have like a huge month and then I'd have like a not so great month because like this, like I wasn't launching or I didn't like do anything. Anyway, I'd made those small months mean like I was a really shit entrepreneur. And that was the bit that I was scared of you seeing. Like when it was like, I remember one month it was like $4,000. And at first when you seen it, I was like in my head going, oh my God, she's going to think I'm so out of integrity. I just had this fucking $50,000 a month. Now I'm doing this. And it's like going to be like, And you were like, this is a healthy business. As soon as you said that, I was like, what? Like, huh?
I'm gonna need to say that. I'm gonna get you to say that again.
I was like, my brain just couldn't compute it because I had been in like fucking charge mode for so long. Of like the standards have to be this high and it never can drop. Like I'd be like, oh, I'll have a good month, and then rather than being like, oh yeah, that was a good month, let's like reset, recalibrate, and then move to the next launch. I was like, even when I wasn't launching something, I was like, I need to beat that one, and it's fucking stupid. Not smart. However, when I started having those small pieces of counsel from you, I noticed my nervous system relaxing around money and the conversations around money. Like, because I'd already done so much work, right? Like, and I say that for those of you not seeing the camera, like in inverted commas, because like I knew all of my money stories by that stage. However, I just wasn't letting anyone see the back end of it, except an Indian woman who has no no awareness of what my actual world is, and I was like, it wasn't in integrity for me to be then telling clients how to impact their numbers and those sorts of things. And I think it was only within a couple of months of you coming on board, we'd taken the really cleaned up all the figures, and it turned into like I'd already had a multiple 6-figure business, but it then was like, okay, suddenly we've got 6 figures of revenue reoccurring, like we know what's happening and those sorts of things. And I could start to piece together the part of the CEO that I was disconnected from, and I was like, oh, I actually feel like I'm on top of my money. Like right now, full transparency, I haven't touched my Xero file fully for 3 weeks, and there's a part of me that's freaking out about it, right? Because I'm like
I was in there on Wednesday and I'm like, oh, she's not been in here for a little while.
Like I had done a couple of little things, but every time I'd sat down to do it, my son was like having something going on. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I'd come back and then I'd come back to it later and I just wouldn't. And anyway, I was like, oh my God, we're going on the podcast. oh, she's gonna know, she's gonna call me out. Like, but I'm like, in my head, I'm like, if that's my biggest concern right now, whereas before, like that was 3 weeks, right? Before, like I remember being like, I don't know what's happening, and I'd get this huge tax bill, and I'd be like, what does this mean? Like, why am I paying this? Like, I don't know what the expenses. I had no awareness of what was happening. Whereas, like the way that you did it, it not only did it bring me back into my power with my money, but it also just like the literacy that came with it of just like the awareness piece of like, wait a minute, what the fuck are you doing? And now like every time I like tap my business card for something personal, I'm like, and you're like, I've got to put that in the personal file now. And I'm like, there's so many conscious processes that happen now. And I'm just like, okay, this means I'm actually aware of what I'm doing with my money now. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a beautiful point to speak into. Like, we don't get taught financial literacy in school. That's just not a thing. And I'm like, how or why? Like, it's such an integral part of life. And especially if you choose entrepreneurship or business ownership, like no one teaches you this stuff. And even me, like I started out as an accountant, but then when I started my own business, I had like this chip on my shoulder to be like, I advise people how to do these things. I'm going to know all the things. But then when you actually do it for yourself, it's like, oh, damn. Like there were a few things that I was like, fuck, I wasn't ready for that. Like, and I was in a position of where I was advising. So I was like, I should know this. I do know this, but like, it's different.
Yeah.
So like I can incredibly appreciate someone who didn't come from an accounting background to then be expected to know all these things and to be aware of the ATO deadlines and the requirements that are needed by the ATO to put you on that green list, the gray area, like the green list of like you're not being flagged for an audit, essentially. Allowing yourself to say yes to an education in this piece is fucking huge, because the fear, the shame, the guilt of like, I'm a business owner, I should know this, the fear of, well, what do I don't know? I don't know what I don't know. And it's going to be pretty massive, because like everyone talks about how hard it is to like, generate revenue, or like taxes, like they're seen as bad. Like if I've got too much money in my bank account, I'm seen as greedy, like all those negative connotations that society just like shoves down our necks.
It's so funny too, because I remember when I first started earning a lot of money, like, and you said like we just don't know what to do with it. I was suddenly like, oh my God, I've got money to go spending, right? It took me straight back to my childhood again. And so rather than like using that money to get in front, the first like year, I was going to Kmart every week and spending $500. I kid you not. I had to go, like, I did this program with one of my coaches, and we had to do a 90-day give up to go up. I gave up fucking Kmart. Most people I'm just spitting everywhere. Most people are giving up chocolate. They're giving up like, things that are like having some kind of physical impact on their health. Like might be like porn, or it's like, eating gluten, or it's like something like, like small. I'm here like, I've got to give up Kmart. I'm not allowed to walk in a Kmart store until these 90 days over. It definitely stopped my addiction to Kmart, like 100%. I don't shop at Kmart at all anymore. However, it was like one of those things where I was like, you realize it's bad when that is the parameter of you like growing up, giving up like something where you're wasting your money on time and time again. And and I know that I'm not the only one who does this. Yeah. Right? Like so many people, it might be different things that they're doing it with. I don't even know how to explain it in terms of like the mindset that goes behind just being like, oh, suddenly I've got more, so now I can like dispense of it. Because for most people who are having that, I guarantee you're on the phone right now going, or listening right now going, oh, no, that's not me. And if you really look, you'll find somewhere where it is.
Yeah, and that's a key point. Like if you actually look, like I'm all about having radically honest conversations with yourself, and you cannot move through what you cannot see. And so that's the biggest like slap in the face that I see with clients when they come on board with me, especially when I do some bookkeeping support. I'm like, who owes you money right now? When was the last time you spoke to them? Like I write off around about 50% of people's, around about 50% of the money that people are owed to my new clients Literally because they're too scared to have conversations, because they're too scared to look at the reality of what people owe them, and then to take action from that, because their habits, their rituals is like, we don't talk about money. We don't ask for money, even though we've provided the service and we've raised an invoice and they've paid a little bit of money, and like, oh, but they're, this is happening in their world and that's happening in their world. And I don't want to say that and whatever excuses come up, but it's like, that's a habit.
Yeah.
That is a ritual that you are used to, because you are used to being, raised in scarcity, in fear.
Do you know what I find the most interesting piece on all of that though, right? It's like, especially in the coaching industry, like your whole fucking job is to hold someone accountable.
Right.
And like, if you can't even have the conversation about the thing that they said yes to, like the one thing that I say is like, did you actually say yes to them in integrity? Did you sign them up in integrity? Because if you're too scared to have that conversation, what that means is that you feel like you didn't fulfill a service. Right.
And then what happens is then you get into your fear and your scarcity, and then you over deliver.
Yeah.
Or like,
you go crazy, like making sure that they're okay. And I'm just like, wow, I've played that game before and I will never, ever, ever play it again. Like,
yeah.
It's
your role as a coach is not to mother them or smother them. It's like actually hold them in their highest. Hey, X, you promised to pay this amount of money every week. You haven't. Where are you at?
Yeah.
And to those people who are like, yeah, but I actually don't have the money right now to fulfill that commitment, have a fucking conversation.
Yeah.
Like open up the channel to be like, hey, Al, or hey, Case, like I know that I owed you $100 this week. I don't have the funds in my bank right now, but I will at this time.
Yeah.
Or, there's some ambiguity in my world right now and I will check back in with you at this time. So like at least honoring what your current reality is and creating a different set point to be like, I will check back in here, or I will follow through with my commitment here. That's still honoring your relationship with money. That's still giving respect to your coach or to your service provider. That's still saying yes to the uncomfortable thing and shifting your relationship with money into a healthy space.
Yeah.
Even though you may not actually have the money in your bank right now to fulfill that commitment, you're still speaking into it. And that energetically like creates shifts in your world like you would not believe.
100%. And I think like people are like, oh, I'm too embarrassed to have that conversation. And it's like, as a person who is a business owner, and we have this as a thing across the board in the company, it's like, if you have the conversation with me around what's going on, I've got so much more respect for you as a client because I know that I can trust your word. Whereas if you just suddenly stop paying and like not showing up, I'm like, I don't want to deal with that person because I can feel that there's unsaidness, right? So it's like that dance between of like, how am I going to show up for it and like really be a stand for this as well? Because even as the business owner, and one thing I've deeply learned is if I'm not willing to have those conversations, like I'm also not willing to be paid. I don't want the money. Like that's the simplest thing. And like, often, I'll be like, oh, I've jumped in and had this conversation and those sorts of things because I've noticed what's happened before you. And you were like, no, Case, you actually need to leave these to me now, because it's like that was one area of my business where I just didn't let drop. And now it's like going, oh, wait, hold on, I can trust other people to help me bring this in as well. Like I don't have to be the only person that's on guard protecting everything, right? Like I think it's so incredibly powerful when we look at the fullness of what can be created when we're actually looking at the truth of where money is being owed to us and where we're owing to others. Like I'm really big on the conversation. I've had so many seasons in business where I've had to like, push back a deadline of something being paid or something like that. And it's not because I don't earn enough money, just sometimes it falls in different times when it comes into the bank. However, I could make myself look like a really shitty business owner because of that. I really could. Or I can go, you know what? It's not there right now, but I know that this is when it lands and this is when it's going to land to you. And open that dialogue. And what happens there is they go, yeah, cool, no worries, Case, thanks for letting me know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's all about the story and like, what are you allowing it to be?
Yeah, 100%. And it's like it comes back to that where I made scarcity really wrong, right? It's like the one thing, like, and I say this so much now, it cracks me up, right? Obviously, since inflation's happened, I know our mortgage has literally doubled, and I know everyone's feeling it at some level, right? But the thing that makes me laugh the most is, like, no matter what's happened anywhere, no matter where my bank account is, my physical life doesn't fucking change. Like I can literally have my bank account sit at like an incredibly low number, and I'll still be doing the same day-to-day things and still be living the same life and still having the same successes and the same wins and the same things. However, once upon a time, I wouldn't have been able to enjoy that if my bank account reflected something, right? Whereas now I'm like, oh yeah, cool, we've just had a big outgoing, amazing. I know that that's going to refill. Cool, let's move on, let's do the thing, and like allow the business to be supported and hold it with integrity. Because the most common thing that I see with business owners is they sit in so much resentment and entitlement towards their business and to who those other people are that should pay them, that they actually forget that if you're not holding the energetic of like welcoming, receiving, open, no matter what's happening, you are going to repel that money every fucking time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back to our point that we said earlier about, where is your nervous system regulated for? What is your nervous system regulated for on that roller coaster or stability?
Yeah.
Like, and knowing what your current reality is, to be like, yeah, we have had a big month of expenses and we know why. It was intentional. It didn't just pop up on us.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it was known, and I'm still calm. I'm still able to live like the wealthiest version of myself. I'm still able to be that person. Like, whereas previously, before doing this work, before leaning into, a healthy relationship with money, it's like, shit, what happened? Oh my God.
And you hear people talk about it so much. They'll just be like, oh, fucking money. And like, they'll say things like that. And I'm just like,
you watch yourself.
I'm like, there's it coming to you now because you just disrespected it. Like, it's like you wouldn't talk about your partner like that. You wouldn't, well, some people would, and you only have to look at their fucking relationship to know what that's really like, But like, I think to myself, I'm like, no matter what it is, regardless of, if you want more of that, like, you get to give it gratitude, right? Gratitude is the fucking key attractor to miracles. And when we allow ourselves to sit in that, like, even on the days where I'm like, oh, this is really hard today, right? Like, for those of you who don't know, I have a chronic back injury, and it can really fuck with my mental health sometimes. Like, really, really fuck with it, especially when you have a child that doesn't want to sleep, right? So some days I can be like, oh, fuck this, I'm so tired, right? And I can either choose to stay in that, or I can recreate my reality. And I can be like, okay, cool. What does that look like for me? I'm tired right now. And does it have to be the way forward? No. Everyone's like, how do you have so much energy when you've got all these other things going on? And it's like, it's the creation point. I choose it. Choose it every day. I can choose to focus on that stuff, which sometimes I do. And every time I do, something fucks up. Truthfully, something fucks up. So it's like, okay, cool. If I put my energy and effort in where I know there's a return on investment, both financially, energetically, in the physical spaces, I know that things move. I just know that. So it's like, okay, cool. Like, I literally, every time I clean my house, this is probably fun for your audience right now, but like, one of the biggest things to manifestation, right, is cleaning your spaces, clearing them out. Every time I clean my house, or I'm clearing out a storage room, or I'm doing something extra, I am literally saying the affirmations. I'm clearing this out to make room for more. I'm clearing this out to make room for more. And if it's something specific, I am literally being like, I will walk around the house some days being like, I'm clearing this cupboard out because I'm calling in 20 grand. Like, and people are just like, what? And I'm like, don't just clear shit out because it's just going to be replaced with something else energetically. Like, be intentional about what you're clearing out and calling in, because all of that stuff matters.
And be clear about what you want, because money loves clarity.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I think, like, what you were saying before about, choosing choosing your energy levels, choosing your life, essentially. Like, I was coached on the power of choice for 3 years, so I'm huge on this. And it's like, 10% we choose our life consciously, 90% we choose it unconsciously. So
Yeah.
like whatever is happening in our world, whatever is showing up, like we have chosen that. Like at a conscious or an unconscious level, we have chosen that. So it's like, and then, you know, secondary to that, what is my choice now to be like, am I shitty at that? Am I grateful for that? Am I like meh about that? You also have a secondary choice. Like when you actually start to live in that paradigm of, I chose all of this. Yes, it may be uncomfortable. Yes, it may not be like what I think I wanted. But when you look back in hindsight, it's like, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
Like, and an example of that is like my dad passing when I was 18. I'm like, at the time, I was like, fuck this. Like, he just died in 36 hours with no fucking warning. Like, what is this bullshit? How did I choose this? I didn't fucking choose this. But then the lessons that I was able to build and grow and the woman that I've become because of that experience and having that at such a young age, I'm like, I wouldn't be able to be this human if I didn't have that experience. Like I chose that. Would I have, you know, would I wish that upon anyone? Absolutely not. But like I can see the beauty in why that had to happen at that time.
100%.
So it's like
the soul contract, right? Like a lot of people like they go, oh, I don't believe in fate. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. And I'm like, I believe in the power of choice, and I always believe that what is for you will not fucking miss you.
Yes, absolutely. Amen.
I'm like, I don't care what anyone says in regards to that, because there's been so many moments in my business where I could have backed out. I could have walked away. But there was some part of me that was like, just fucking stay. Like, especially in the earlier days when I was literally like struggling. Like, I had 3 jobs at one point trying to get this business off the ground. And there was something that was just held strong, like that real staying power. And the minute I would like push over that piece, like that bit that like I want to disconnect right now, I want to quit, but I just like, I'm just going to go one more day. That next day, something would fucking land, right? And it was like the universe was like listening to what I was choosing every moment. And I always say it, like the life that you're living now is a culmination of every choice that you've made up until this now moment, right? And I think back even like 5 years ago, right? Like my life, literally single, week to week, diagnosed infertile, scared of fucking man, had no idea what my future was going to be like. And I was constantly asking, when is someone going to come and save me? Right? This is on top of 10 years of self-development already. Right? Like, let's just highlight that. I've been doing self-development since I was a really young woman. Right? And I think the biggest thing is like that victim consciousness that I was still holding was still masking my ability to show up. And it still rears its head every now and then. And I have to get really honest with myself when it does. Because I'm like, cool, what bit of myself did I just hit? Like, and I know we're going a bit over time here, but I think this is quite cool because like I see this show up in my relationship. If that victim consciousness that was still there from my childhood ever rears its head, the first place that gets affected, even though it's about money, it goes to my relationship. It's got nothing, it won't show up as a money problem. It'll show up as what's my partner doing wrong? What's this doing wrong? What's that happening? And people are like, well, why is it always about the partner? And it's got nothing to do with that, right? And it's like, well, the part of us that we have to own in ourselves doesn't want to own that piece yet because we're not ready to dissolve that. Because if I dissolve that, the identity shifts and then the paradigm changes and then that's a whole new world that we don't fucking know yet, right? So it's like this last 6 months for me has been like such a deep digging and like literally came to this point, I kid you not, like 3 weeks ago where I was like, and I tell my clients all this all the time, right? I'm like, sometimes it's not about like putting it on your partner for them to earn extra money, or it's not about like blaming them for where you're at financially. It's just about going, what choices have I made that led me here every time? And I remember I was sitting there and I'd had the conversation because I'd had a really, really tough financial week. And I was cranky, and it was the first time in my entire adult life that I'd been cranky over money, and not one part or ounce of blame went externally. And the biggest shift, like, so I've done a lot of it where it hasn't gone externally before, but there was no shred of shame in my body for myself. That was the shift. right?
Yeah.
That was the
Huge.
shift. It was fucking huge because I was like, rather than like, even though like for years I've not blamed anyone else, I'm always like, I am the co-creator here. This is me. This is my thing that I'm doing. And even when I had my son and I was like a month from giving birth, I was still like, oh, you should be doing more. You should be. And this time when it happened, like obviously I knew that there was more money coming in. I wasn't stressed at all. So there was a whole different element of like what the scarcity actually looked like. And I would still normally go, oh, I should be here. I should be there. But I was just like, this is where I am right now. And I can sit here and shame spiral myself. And every time we enter a shame spiral, we activate more fear, right? That's just the duality of what that works. Your feminine's going to sit in shame. Your masculine's going to sit in fear because it's going to want to override everything and like find the way, but it's finding the way through, like through, like rather than actually getting a bird's eye view and actually having a look at what's going on. And so when that was happening for me, I was just like, oh, cool. So what happens now? And rather than being like, I'm going to force myself to do more, I was like, there's an inward space here that gets to happen. And this came off the back end of a conversation with one of my mentors. Because I said to her, I was like, I have these moments where I'm like, and it's happened to me right before every up level I've had. Right before every up level I have, my fucking bank account completely wipes itself. And she's just like, yeah, because it's your opportunity now to reflect and recheck in with every offering that you have.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah. And she'd said it to me before, but when she said it this time, I was like, oh. Like this woman's been my mentor for like 10 years, right? So she knows the trials and tribulations that I've walked through. And this time when it happened, like it was, and just to highlight, my bank accounts weren't completely empty, like our personal accounts weren't. This was just the business one. But I was like going, okay, cool. What's here for me? What do I get to dive deeper in on? And where do I want the direction of my business to go? Because I started noticing I was feeling disassociated from my brand as well. And I was like, hold on a second. There is something here. So it wasn't so much about the money. It was about who am I being in business and where do I get to check in with that level? And so I was like, cool, we get to do a bit of a brand deepening here. Because I noticed I'd moved so much into strategy talking around business that I'd forgot the whole bit of my business that I actually do teach more of is the energetics piece. That's my jam. And once I realized, I was like, I'm not displaying that online much anymore. I was like, oh, cool, there's the piece. And then as soon as I connected in with that, everything just started moving again. So,
and it's a common theme I see as well in my clients to be like, oh, I'm not having any money coming through, or it's dried up, or whatever the thing. And it's like, I need to work through this exact money thing. And I'm like, 9 times out of 10, it's not about the money.
No.
Like the money is literally a byproduct of the person that you are, the things that you were doing, the actions you were taking, the inactions that you were taking. Money is actually the byproduct. So everyone who is focused on like money, I want all of these things. It's like, yeah, you can, but like, what about this option over here? What about like, being in integrity with what you were teaching? Are you embodied in what you were teaching? Like, which leads into, your signature program, like Embodied Business, where in your entire world, not just your business, like the whole program is your entire life. Where are you out of integrity with that? Where are you not in an embodiment of what you teach? That's the leak. Like that's where we go with the magnifying glass to then backtrack essentially to the reverse engineer, and that will have a flow-on effect on your money world.
100%.
So
I kid you not, literally, you and I were having a conversation the other day about, I can't even fucking remember what it was about. And I was like, oh. And as soon as I went, oh, you're like, oh, the payment just went through.
Yes.
What I'm talking about. But I was like, that's literally what happens when we start to quantum shift. And I talk about this all the time. Like, I used to have this belief I operated from that was the men couldn't love. And the minute I actually was like, holy fuck, that's what I'm operating from, I get to put that down. I'm no longer going to choose that, because if I choose that, this is what my road looks like. And I get to choose that men can love, and I'm going to find the ways that they love. And that was the commitment I made to myself. Kid you not, 24 hours later, I'm sitting on a date with a fucking man that I now have built an entire life with, that I am so madly in love with 4 years later. And I'm just like, like, that gets to be the reality when we actually, like, congruency with it. And, like, I think a lot of people, well, I'll say this point and then we can wrap up if you want to be mindful of time. But, like, so many people get so excited because they're like, oh, yeah, I've got this belief now, I'm just going to change it, right? But until you're fucking, like, so solid in that, like, the congruency has to be, like, there is absolutely no part of me that still holds on to that belief. That's when it shifts. And so it's like, if you've still got a little part of you that's going, oh, I'm not worthy of that. Like, I was literally sitting, I've been playing with this, like, I guess you could say, like, this leadership practice of late, of, like, you know, the question is, am I actually acknowledging and living into all of my desires, right? And, like, every time, like, I'm so just brutally honest on it. Like, this is the practice that I do. I'm like, what are my desires for today? And then it's like, did I actually follow through on what I desired for today? So some days it might be like, I just want to go out and I want to have a really nice breakfast. So you'll notice that I'm, like, having more breakfasts out and things like that lately. And I'm like, because for me, that feels really nourishing. I really love just sitting at a cafe and doing some work. And so I'm like, cool. And on the days when I know I have that thought and I don't acknowledge it because I'm like, oh, I just can't be bothered, or I don't want to spend the money, I'm like, cool, interesting. Like, just noticing where I'm playing into that with integrity or not, and just getting really, really aware of what am I asking for and what am I not actually allowing myself to be in the space of asking for. So if I want something, did I actually speak into that?
Yeah, amen. And I think on a relational context to that, so many people are like, oh, but he should have known. He should have known that I wanted flowers. He should have known that I wanted him to prepare a bath. He should have known that this is what I wanted for dinner. I'm like, did you say something?
Seriously?
Like, how the fuck? He's not a mind reader. Like, stop whinging.
I had this conversation with my mum, right? She's like, I've been with him for 25 years. He should know. And I'm like, because my mum always looks at my relationship, and I think she now compares her relationship to my relationship, because she's always like, oh my God, he's so amazing. And I'm like, Mum, do you think that Urbane just suddenly decided he was going to buy me flowers every week and he was just going to, like, be this most amazing man all the time? Like, did you think he just figured out how to love me perfectly? And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, she goes, he just does so much for you. And I'm like, I had to train him. Like, I literally was like, hey, babe, when you put the cup in the sink and you don't put it in the dishwasher, it fucking rattles me hard. So can you please just move it from the sink to the dishwasher and keep the sink clear, because I don't like a full sink. I said, if you're not going to put it in the dishwasher, don't put it in the sink, put it on the bench. And he's like, oh, okay, simple. I know that now, right? Like, so simple and so not. The flowers thing. Yeah. Babe, I want flowers every week. Okay, I'll get you flowers every week. Simple as that, right? It's like a simple asking. And I used to put it online all the time, but now I don't, because it's so much of my norm and my paradigm of my world. Like, some weeks he may not get them purely because of, like, time constraints and all those things, but it's never doesn't feel shitty now if I don't get them. And when I get them now, I'm like, oh, he remembered again. It's never flowers again. Like, I never get that, because I'm like, oh, he thought of me again. He knows that I love me. He loves it. Or he'll be like, make me a cup of tea just because. Like, you know, like the other night, I'm sitting there playing with Charlie Kid. He goes, I need you to go and sit on the couch right now. And I was like, why? And he's like, because I made you a cup of tea. Do you want to enjoy it or not? And I was like, oh, okay. But, like, that's...
I love you.
Yeah, but it's those little things, because, like, I've literally told him everything that fills my cup up, so he's got the golden ticket on how to love me, as he's done with me. You know, and I think money is exactly the same. It wants to work with you as well, right?
You took the words out of my mouth. I'm like, you've provided clarity around that relationship, in your love relationship, and money wants that too.
Yeah.
It wants the clarity. Like, if you want 15 grand months, fucking say it. Claim that.
People always go, oh, I can't afford that. And then suddenly they say yes to something that they didn't expect to, and they find a way to fucking magically have the money every time. And I'm just like I said to you, I made one of the biggest investments I've ever made starting next year. And I'm like shitting myself because I have no idea how I'm going to come up with that money. And I'm also like, it'll fucking happen because I've made the declaration. I'm just not worried about it. You know?
Somehow it will come through and it'll
work out. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, well, to close out, one final question. Keep it short and sharp for me. What is the biggest money lesson that you're moving through right now?
I think it would be the one that I was speaking into with the scarcity piece. Knowing the difference between like setting yourself up through allocating things and not making it mean you're in scarcity, if that makes sense. Like, you know, for me right now, I'm in a really huge evolution with my business and my branding. So like there's a huge part of my budget that's been moved from one particular part of my business and it's moving into marketing. And for me, prior, I would have been like, oh, but I can't have the both of them right now. And that's making me really angry. Whereas I'm like, no, this is actually creating the both of them. And this is the way that we move that through. And so it's really looking at the long game of the structure side of the business rather than like, you know, what's cool or what's in right now. I'm really like boring business for me is like my jam right now, really coming back to what that means. And I guess just recalibrating at that level because, you know, behind the scenes, I've got some other things happening with money that I don't know what that looks like. And so I'm just learning like, okay, cool. Like I get to be with what is here, move towards what is coming and also be unattached to all of it.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. And just a side note to speak into that awkward thing, that's my alarm at 10:15 a.m. every day. An alarm goes off to remind myself so that I check in to be like, am I alive? Am I being playful? And am I being grateful for what I have in my world? So if you're still listening at this point, I invite you to do something similar because that checks me back into my current reality and allows me to be present and allows me to be like, what's actually here for me right now and what's my choice, which I think is a beautiful encapsulation of what we've spoken about now. What is your choice? What are you choosing? Because at the end of the day, everything that's showing up for you is showing up for you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you for coming on the Money Queen podcast. I've loved having you here. I mean, we could chat all day, every day.
I swear we could make 50 podcast episodes just from the lounge room conversations.
I know. Oh, so good. Yes. Thank you very much for your time and your space and your energy and your friendship.
So welcome, babe. And I just want to say this publicly, like, you know, I don't think it ever can be said enough, like what it is to invest in your financial literacy and being held accountable in it. So if you are thinking about doing this kind of work with you, Al, like get in there. Like she's obviously like my wing woman in life, basically. Babe thinks we are lesbians. And like having someone who has your highest intentions always, especially from an unbiased space in that side of it, I don't think you can like really put that into like what it actually does for your own personal growth as a woman. Because when I first started with you, I remember the conversation of like, yeah, cool, I was earning all my money, but I didn't have any power in it. And, you know, it gets to really be a reality where we get to hold it powerfully.
Amen to that. Amen. Thank you.
Love you, darling.
Love you. Thank you, Queen, for saying yes to your yes in listening to this episode and being a part of raising the feminine collective one conversation at a time. Remember to share this episode with your business besties and join me in breaking the tabooness around having money conversations. As always, if you have enjoyed this episode, please rate, subscribe, and share this on your social media, remembering to tag me in it to help this conversation go further, which creates a bigger ripple effect.